Hello, welcome to Fabulous Food. Today we're going to be making cherry oat squares. So the first thing to do is to put your oven on. So that's 180 degrees C or 160 degrees if you've got a fan oven. And the next thing we're going to do is to line our baking tin. Now if you make these at school, I will have done this for you, but I can show you how to do it at home. So my tin is 20 centimetres square, but any tin that's around that size will do. Then you want to cut yourself a piece of baking parchment that is bigger than your tin. So when you hold it up at the edges, you can see it just comes to the top of the tin. And then we need to put a little bit of oil in the bottom of our tin. That's called greasing the tin. A tiny bit of oil in like that. And then you can either use a pastry brush or just a bit of kitchen roll. That'll do fine. And just wipe that oil all the way around your tin. Make sure you get it into the corners and up the sides. Like that. That helps the baking parchment to stick to your tin. Then take your square of parchment and just gently ease it into the tin. It's a bit big at the moment. I'm going to make some adjustments so that it folds into the corners. I'm going to snip the corners off. 1, 2, 3, last one, 4, and then snip down each corner. And that helps the paper just fold around the edges. So again, snip into the corner and do that on all 4 edges. So that's our tin lined. The first ingredient on our list is 140 grams of melted butter. So obviously the butter doesn't arrive melted, we've got to melt that in a saucepan. So I've put that on the scales, set the scales to 0, and then I'm going to measure in 140 grams of butter. So I've got unsalted butter here as it's going in a sweet cake, but you could use salted butter if that's all you have at home, that would be fine. You could use margarine if you wanted to, that's too much now, so take a little bit out, a bit more, there, 140 grams of butter. I'm just going to put that on very low on my hob, you can't see it's just next to me here, just so it begins to melt gently while I weigh out the rest of my ingredients. But if you're doing this at home, you might want to stand and just keep an eye on your butter so that it melts but it doesn't start to boil and bubble and burn. So now we're going to weigh out our dry ingredients in a bowl. So I'm going to put my bowl on the scales and set them to 0, just like we always do. And then I'm going to weigh in my flour. So that's 100 grams of self-raising flour if you're making a cake. 100 grams. There, so 100 grams of flour, set the scales back to 0. 175 grams of caster sugar going in next. So pop it to the side of the flour if you can, and then if you need to take a little bit out, it's much easier to take just one ingredient out and not have the flour contaminating it. So it's 175 grams of sugar. Set the scales back to 0, and then we're going to add in our third dry ingredient, which are the porridge oats. We want 175 grams of porridge oats. So these are the regular porridge oats that you would make porridge breakfast with. They're not the instant oats that you can put in your microwave, so just make sure you've got the right kind. Got too many in there, so take a few out. So I put them to the side so I could take a few out without getting sugar and flour in them. So there's my sugar, my flour and my oats in a bowl. And now my butter's melted. So I'm going to get that off of the hob now. So while my butter's cooling down a little bit, I can get the other ingredients ready. So I want 100 grams of glacey cherries. So glacey cherries come in a tub like this. I'm going to weigh out 100 grams onto a plate. So set my scales to 0 and weigh out 100 grams. I think it's going to be I'm just going to use that last one anyway. And then we need to cut those in half. So take the plate off of the scales, otherwise you'll damage your scales if you apply pressure on them. And just using our little pincer bridge like that, just a tiny bridge, knife through the middle, cut each cherry in half, like that. I'll just work through the whole lot. You just need to wipe your fingers at the end, they'll be a little bit sticky. So all my cherries are chopped in half. And the other ingredient is 1 egg. So I'm going to use a little jug to break the egg onto there. Put your fingers in, pull it open, pop the egg in like that, and then just give it a gentle mix with a fork to break the yolk up. Okay, so wipe the fingers again. We've got all of our dry ingredients in our bowl. And then if we're looking at the recipe book, it tells us to add the egg, the melted butter, like that, and the cherries into our bowl, and then to stir them together. So I'm going to bring my spoon, my wooden spoon, around the edge of the bowl into the middle, like that, around the edge, into the middle, around the edge, into the middle. Make sure you go through the bottom of the bowl in the middle as well to get the dry ingredients up like that. And you just keep going until everything is evenly mixed. So when you get towards the end and everything's evenly mixed, just use your fork or a spoon to scrape the mixture off of the wooden spoon, like that, and give it one final stir, like that. And now we're going to put it in the baking tin. So here's my baking tin. I'm going to scrape the mixture in like that. It came out in one go. So really it's a cross between a cake and a flapjack because we've got the oats in it. It's quite sticky. So I'm just going to scrape it all off the spoon again, and then just use a fork to gently press the cake mix down into the tin, like that. Make sure your cherries are spread out. You don't want a piece that hasn't got any cherries in it. Once you've done that, I'm going to put it in the oven for 20 to 25 minutes. So if you set your timer for 20 minutes and then check it, if it's lovely and golden brown, you can take it out, and if not, leave it for another 5 minutes just to finish cooking. There, I think that's fine now. So I've got my cherry oat squares out of the oven. They actually took 25 minutes to cook, so I gave them an extra 5 minutes on top of the 20 minutes I'd set the timer for originally. I'm going to let that cool down in the tin completely before I cut it, and then I've got more chance of it not falling apart when I cut it into squares, but it will be absolutely delicious. I hope you enjoy your cherry oat squares, and please send us some photographs on Google Classroom of your products so we can have a look and see how well you've all done. Thank you, bye bye.